Dozens arrested as Columbia University pro-Palestinian protesters. Occupy campus library in growing national clash in the latest chapter of an escalating showdown between student protesters and federal authorities. Dozens of pro-Palestinian demonstrators were arrested on Wednesday after storming and occupying part of the iconic Butler Library at Columbia University in New York City. The incident comes amid growing tensions on university campuses across the United States, with the Trump administration intensifying its crackdown on what it describes as pro-Hamas activism and rampant antisemitism in higher education institutions. The library takeover videos that quickly spread on social media showed dozens of masked demonstrators, many wearing traditional keffiyeh scarves, chanting slogans in support of Palestinians, and waving banners as they entered the library. According to University President Claire Shipman, the protesters forced their way into a reading room in the historic building, injuring 2 university security officers in the process. The demonstration, organized by a coalition that includes the group Columbia University Apartheid Divest, unfolded over several hours, culminating in a tense standoff between protesters and campus safety officials who blocked exits and demanded identification. Those who refused to produce a Columbia ID were detained by New York Police Department, NYPD officers at the university's request. Over 70 individuals were reportedly arrested, though no formal charges have yet been announced. It remains unclear how many of those detained are international students, but U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has confirmed that visa statuses of those involved will be reviewed, a policy now standard under President Donald Trump's sweeping campus protest enforcement measures. University condemns outrageous behavior. President Shipman, who assumed the role in March following the resignation of her predecessor amid similar campus unrest, issued a strongly worded statement condemning the demonstration. She labeled the protest as outrageous and completely unacceptable, particularly during a crucial academic period when students are preparing for final exams, while Shipman confirmed that the protest was isolated to one room in Butler Library. She argued that its impact reverberated far beyond. It is completely unacceptable that some individuals are choosing to disrupt academic activities and place others at risk. She urged students to stay away from the library while authorities manage the situation. This marks the first time the university has called in the NYPD since the occupation of Hamilton Hall in April 2024, which ended after a nearly 24-hour sit-in, demanding Columbia divest from companies linked to Israel. Protesters, we are being repressed. In a post circulated through activist social media accounts, the protesters accused Columbia of violent repression and collaboration with a federal agenda aimed at silencing Palestinian voices. They maintained that they refused to show identification to police and university public safety officers as a form of civil disobedience. Some video clips show slogans like "Free Palestine" scrawled on bookshelves and walls, actions critics described as vandalism and an attack on academic space, while supporters characterize them as symbolic acts of resistance against what they see as institutional complicity in Israel's military operations in Gaza. The occupation occurred just days after the university faced renewed backlash from federal officials and pro-Israel advocacy groups for allegedly tolerating anti-Semitic rhetoric during campus protests. Trump administration responds with harsh measures. President Trump, who has made campus unrest a major theme of his second term, has taken aggressive steps to curtail pro-Palestinian activism at universities. The administration has revoked hundreds of student visas since late 2024 and continues to threaten international students with deportation for involvement in protests it deems as extremist or anti-American. Secretary of State Rubio reinforced this hardline stance, referring to the demonstrators as trespassers and vandals, and declaring that pro-Hamas thugs are no longer welcome in our great nation. Trump himself has accused Columbia and other top-tier institutions of harboring anti-Semitism, arguing they have failed to protect Jewish students and faculty. He has already threatened to cut more than $400 million in federal funds to Columbia, unless the university implements stricter controls on campus protests and speech deemed anti-Semitic. In March, Columbia appeared to partially concede to the administration's demands by instituting a ban on face coverings during protests and restructuring. oversight of certain academic programs. However, the university now faces internal resistance and legal action from faculty members who have filed a lawsuit challenging the funding cuts and alleged violations of academic freedom. A broader crackdown on higher education Colombia is not alone. The Trump administration has issued similar warnings to more than 60 universities nationwide, threatening the withdrawal of funding unless they comply with federal guidelines addressing anti-Semitism. In what many have called a political escalation, Trump on Tuesday announced the termination of $2.2 billion in federal funding to Harvard University, citing the institution's refusal to comply with federal demands related to its protest policies and oversight structures. This sweeping federal intervention has alarmed academic leaders, civil liberties advocates, and international watchdogs who argue the government is blurring the line between combating hate and suppressing free speech. Critics say the administration's rhetoric conflates support for Palestinian rights with anti-Semitism, and that it risks criminalizing peaceful dissent on issues of global human rights. Supporters of the crackdown, however, argue that Jewish students have been intimidated and marginalized on campuses for too long, and that institutions have failed to act decisively. A national flashpoint, the events at Columbia are the latest in a national wave of campus activism that has surged in response to the ongoing Israel-Gaza conflict and U.S. military and diplomatic support for Israel. Columbia in particular has become a symbolic battleground, with its historic legacy of student activism dating back to Vietnam War protests now being invoked by a new generation of activists. Pro-Palestinian demonstrators have held sit-ins, hunger strikes, and class walkouts in recent months, demanding their institutions divest from defense contractors, sever ties with Israeli institutions, and publicly condemn the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Meanwhile, Republican lawmakers and conservative media have amplified calls for harsher penalties against students and faculty involved in such activism, portraying them as radicals undermining national security. What happens next? With final exams approaching, Columbia's administration is walking a tightrope, balancing federal pressure, student demands, donor concerns, and the university's reputation as a bastion of academic freedom. We will not tolerate hate or violence in any form in our city, New York City Mayor Eric Adams said in a post on X, signaling support for the university's decision to involve law enforcement. The future for the detained students, especially those on international visas, remains uncertain. Legal challenges are expected to mount in the coming weeks as civil rights organizations prepare to defend those facing deportation or academic penalties. In the meantime, campus tensions are unlikely to subside, with the administration signaling an unyielding approach and student groups vowing to escalate protests until their demands are met. Columbia and American academia as a whole may be bracing for a long, volatile season of confrontation. Thank you for watching InfoHub, your source for trusted news and insights. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay informed.